I'll ask them to do some self-introductions, but just to get things started, we've got Simon Cook, who's the Commercial Director of YouView, Justin Dewhurst, General Manager of Bloomberg Media, Keith Underwood, who's the Director of Strategy and Technology at Channel 4, and of course Tom, who gave the excellent presentation just now, is also with us. Could we start with a few self-introductions and give a reflection on where you're coming from?
Yeah, I think we're right in the middle of this at YouView. We're in the middle of we've got a platform that brings together broadcast and VOD and all different types of content, apps, etc. So my role there is commercial director. I also run the data program, and I think Tom's points on data are absolutely correct. You know, data is going to be the key to understanding all of this going forwards.
Okay.
My name is Keith Underwood. I run corporate strategy and technology at Channel 4. Again, I think Tom set out very well the position that the broadcasters are faced with, in that our core business is strong, but it's necessary for those broadcasters to embrace and deploy new technologies and continue to innovate. That's what Channel 4 has done, and that's what we're seeking to continue to do.
Justin.
So I'm Justin Dewhurst. I'm the General Manager for the Bloomberg Media business in EMEA. We're part of a larger business. Bloomberg is the world's biggest financial and business news organisation, but has a subscriber base that's relatively small in number but relatively high in value. And the media business is positioned to support that. Love the emojis, and also picked up on a point that was made earlier. Niche is a dirty word. I'm not sure I'd agree with that. I think I'd use the word focus rather than niche. But as well as being a traditional television broadcaster, we're highly diversified across the portfolio, across radio, web, apps, magazines, but all of them focused on the one piece of the, as it were, content spectrum that we think is most important for us and for our audiences, which is financial news and business. That's what we are focused on, and that's the niche in which we play.
Thanks very much, Keith. So, Tom, let me just, we'll sort of segue from your presentation, but one of the closing aspects that you mentioned was about actually the length of program content, that some of these alternative suppliers have been focused on short form, and they need to embrace the long form. I'd like to challenge that a bit. Is there a change in the audience? Because up till now, program schedules have kind of dictated 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever. Is there something natural about those program lengths or movie length? Or now we've got the freedom, are we going to see different program lengths? Shorter attention spans might come into it as well.
Well, I think you can also look at that from the broadcast point of view. Yeah. I mean, I think broadcasting could make the migration into the digital space with what I think about as mid-form. I think there's somewhere between the two. If you know, I heard someone say once, if you shake a movie hard enough, 10, 15 minutes will drop out the bottom. And I think if you look at a traditional 1 hour, certainly reality program, there's an enormous amount of it. There's a reasonable percentage of it that leads you from a commercial break back into the show. And if you found a way of creating, instead of that 30-minute program, a way of expressing that in 10 to 15 minutes, perhaps what you find is that the traditional industry can find a way of moving into the digital world. So in effect, you may be able to create 3 kinds of forms of the same program. One is 1 to 2 minutes, which, by the way, is where most of the viewed content in YouTube resides. 1 to 2 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes, and then the traditional 22 minutes for a half-hour program once you take out the advertising. So I think it could be 2 ways. Yeah. Actually, I think it could be 2 ways.
YouView, Simon, on that in terms of program length, are you traditional or not?
Well, we're an aggregator really, so we merge broadcast content with IP content and we present it seamlessly, and we do that because we have a metadata engine and we've got 70,000 assets on our service, and many of them are movies and many of them are TV shows, but some of them are short music videos. So we can take that content. I think over time you will see more short form content or mid form content. And I think the challenge is how you present that, how you get people to use that, how you personalise it for them.
Right.
And I think, again, to Tom's point, you know, the data behind that and understanding what people are consuming and
Assume
what
that
they're
is key,
interested in.
finding out.
Well, it's not just the data; it's how you present it.
Yeah.
You know, if you move to shorter form content, you know, and you've got, as I say, 70,000 assets there already. How do you find it? You know, content discovery in this new world is really, really important. You know, the big scheduled shows that are on broadcast, the appointment to view, people are always going to find. The longer tail stuff, the really interesting stuff that might be there in short form. You know, you've got to find ways of presenting that and making it relevant to the users.
Again, broadcaster's perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, we've always made short-form elements of the long-form shows, as Tom said, clips of Big Brother, clips of £1 Million Drop, so on and so forth. Those work online. I think the change has come now where broadcasters, and particularly Channel 4, are looking at online shorts originals, and we really started producing those a couple of years back now. And it's been really important for us. It's allowed us to really experiment with creative concepts, with new producers who might not originally fit or might not naturally fit with the long-form channels. So what we've been able to do is try new concepts, try new producers, and then eventually those concepts may well evolve onto the long-term channels. So for Channel 4, that has a remit to innovate and work with a broad array of producers, actually it's been a really important testing ground for new concepts. And so the new platform that we've launched, All 4, enables us to have a home for not just the catch-up services, but the original short forms, live channels, box sets, a much, much wider variety. And I think that's where broadcasters are going. Where originally online they relied on catch-up, I think more and more now is about online originals, your box sets, your live channels, and a much wider offering for consumers online.
I guess Bloomberg's always had more flexibility in terms of programme length and clips.
Well, yes, I suppose on the one hand, as a live news broadcaster, we're kind of there the whole time. We're pleased that having just gone live with a new studio in Dubai a couple of months back, we're now doing a full live global 24-hour service. Previously, we were challenged by the time zone, I guess you'd say, when, you know, sort of London handed over to New York and then over to Hong Kong. We were still missing an hour or so in the morning at 5 a.m. for those that want to get up bright and early. We filled that. So we're a full 24-hour service from a news broadcaster perspective. But even just 2 years ago, we invested in a new team of digital video producers, and that's really focused on that short form side of the house. We're very pleased with how that's going. That, you know, that's attracting significant audiences. Some of the short form is as long as 90 seconds. Our explainers that we produced on Friday to help folks understand some of the business and political challenges that we're facing at the moment have proved incredibly valuable, particularly for our apps audience. But the audience on apps is not necessarily different in terms of makeup and sort of demographic to the audience on TV. Our audience is very focused. They may be watching TV. They may be watching TV through their terminal device in an office, but when they're not in their sort of office environment, they're watching pretty much the same content, perhaps shorter form, but on different devices. Right. So we find it's important to take content and not be obsessed necessarily with the length, but rather with the format through which people are viewing or listening or reading, and the location in which they find themselves.
Okay. We've got a very varied audience here, so I'm going to swap it around a bit and change the theme a little bit more to you guys are living through this transition. We all go back a few years, some not as many as me, but what transitions are you sort of seeing in your ecosystem in the area in which you're working? Start with.
I mean, it's everything you're talking about here. It's the convergence of broadcast with on-demand and IP. I mean, customers don't see it as any different. They see it as content, and they want to consume that content now. I mean, new providers like Netflix and Amazon have set expectations around being able to watch content anywhere, on any device, with recommendations and personalisation. And those are the expectations they have. Yes, we're still heavily dominated by the broadcast schedule because it's good content that people want to watch. But they also want to find this other content. So, part of the rationale for YouView being set up, and Keith is one of our shareholders, is what's the future for the big broadcasters, and it is presenting their content that is broadcast along with on demand and making it a seamless experience. So you're not going to a smart TV and surfing through HDMI sources to find Netflix or to find BBC iPlayer, it's there. It's a common metadata engine. And I think you've always got to remember that that for the customer we have IP channels, we have multicast IP channels, we have Sky Sports and BT Sports and a lot of the pay channels. They're just the channel in the guide that people surf down to play, and our objective is to have the same experience, the same quality of service for an IP channel, for a VOD asset, or for a broadcast channel.
So does that mean, many traditional broadcasters going back a few years set their new media business, their online business, as a world apart from the mainstream? Are they now fully integrated in?
I think they are. I mean, I think Keith's comment about all four. I'll answer for him. The All 4 app now is broadcast, it's on demand, it's shorts. Yeah. Now there was a time when it was just on demand content. Yeah. I think when you look at people like Netflix and Amazon, they're doing the same thing, particularly Amazon. The technology today actually is, in many respects, has taken away the sort of gatekeeper role of a set-top box, and you can do all the things you do on a set-top box in the cloud. There's rights restrictions, and we see Amazon doing all their own on-demand content. In the future, they'll stream linear channels. There'll be a virtual platform there. So this convergence is happening, whether it's happening in the home, dominated by broadcast on hybrid set-top boxes, or in the cloud.
Keith, it sounds like you're going to violently agree with
He's
that.
answered very well, actually. No, look, I mean, you've seen this convergence, and I think structurally you're seeing it within the broadcasters as well. You intimated that a few years ago online might have been a separate department. Now, certainly within the major broadcasters and certainly within Channel 4, they're fully integrated. I mean, our digital teams report into our Chief Creative Officer, who's got oversight across the piece. So online originals as well as originals for the main broadcast shows. In technology terms as well, we have our digital distribution teams fully aligned with our broadcast distribution team. So it's now more than ever you've got this technology function driving the business as well because of the possibilities of what we can do with that. But again, I mean, I think it is important to recognise that we're doing this from a position of strength within the core market. I mean, I sort of don't want to go on with stats, but people watching on a TV live and sort of catch-up content still accounts for 3 hours, 36 minutes a day. And that compares to 3 hours, 39 minutes a day 10 years ago. So the TV product is still incredibly resilient because of what it offers consumers. And so actually what we found is we're able to work from a position of strength and then to work in new areas of online to distribute the great content that we invest in, and also to look at new content formats, as I mentioned earlier with shorts, new production partnerships, and then increase the reach of that great content that we're producing. But because fundamentally, it does come down to great content, always has done and it always will do. And it is, I think as Tom said, the broadcasters who are still investing in creating that content, and they still have the platforms to create the big brands.
Right, yeah. So you've sort of started a bit ahead of the curve because you didn't come in a sense in the traditional broadcast, and you've got some of the sort of new era aspects. What changes have you seen in your business in recent times in terms of the ecosystem as we've referred to?
Well, in a sense, I think the starting point being that as long as you're investing in great content, you're probably well placed to take it forward from there and pick up on the opportunities that present themselves. But to Tom's point earlier about the consolidation of publishers, that's clearly a direction of travel for broadcasters or media publishers or whatever definition you choose. At the very same time, and possibly in parallel, if not directly as a result of that, we're seeing a significant growth, as I think we all are, in routes to audience. The distribution opportunities that present themselves now are significantly larger and potentially more complex than they were 10 years back. And in a sense, from a publisher perspective, the challenge is to understand not how to continue investing in our content proposition, but to understand what is the best route to that audience. And we're very focused not just on our business news and finance news content proposition, but on the audiences that are interested in that type of content. And there are challenges for us in choosing and in working with the right distribution partners to connect that audience. And I think in some ways, some of that is rooted in the issue that Tom raised around data. The traditional measurement systems for television channels certainly don't necessarily serve a focused publisher perhaps as well as they would a more general publisher. And certainly we find from a digital perspective there are some major benefits for us in showing that it's great to, for instance, invest in our digital video content output because we can measure the results of that very quickly. We can see that when we go with Facebook Live on Friday, we suddenly found hundreds of thousands of folks tuning in. We couldn't necessarily have mapped that against some of the traditional kind of people meter systems in different markets around the world.
Cheers. Thanks for that. Thanks, Justin. Tom, you touched upon YouTube in your presentation, and the popular belief is that YouTube wants to get into the mainstream that we're just talking about. But isn't it a huge challenge for them to sort of change their spots from the democratic, small, do-it-yourself kind of video operation into be perceived as a serious program supplier? Is it your understanding that's their aspiration? Is it a challenge for them to do that?
I mean, they've tried it several times. It's not as if it's the first time they've thought about this. I think you've just got to follow the money, and where the money is in video. I think I'm right in saying, well, Keith, you're probably going to know this better than me, that the average price of a video commercial versus a traditional display ad is 4x to 10x, depending on the target audience. So there's an absolute need to chase the video revenue. That's one characteristic. So they're motivated to do it. The other thing is, I think they're motivated to do it because they've got so much information. They can serve the right kind of commercial messages. In fact, they don't probably need the traditional 30-minute program, because arguably they can serve precisely the commercial message that they can make money on to precisely the target audience that is relevant to, so they can become much more efficient in that area. So they're motivated to do it. They have the capability, and I think we shouldn't forget, these businesses make it in one place and they ship it around the world. That's where they come up against a challenge. I think global content providers, particularly some sports industries that are desperately looking to get their content out to broader audiences, could be interested in partnering with a number of these providers. But ultimately, they're going to have to write very significant checks to draw enough of the relevant content in, and there's no evidence today to suggest that's going to happen. I suspect what you'll begin to see is, imagine if ITV cancel the X Factor in 2017 or 2018. And imagine a time when Channel 4 aren't interested in it, Channel 5 aren't interested, Sky 1 isn't interested in it, and Psycho then begin to think of other opportunities. And that could be the moment when certain programs begin to appear in a slightly different way, particularly live programming that requires interaction. They are programs that could begin to appear on those platforms. And that could be the way in to the commissioning of program. That's where it's a miss business rather than a hit business. Drama is all about the number of shows that fail versus the number of shows that succeed. So I don't think that you're going to see those digital players move into that space early, but I can see a migration into live, and I can see a migration into some program that just doesn't make it onto traditional broadcast as the first phase.
But you just triggered the thought that there's a lot of speculation about content producers going directly to end users and bypassing the aggregators. Is that something we need to factor into the discussion?
Well, I mean, we've seen it on a couple of occasions. There's no evidence to suggest that's scalable. Louis C.K., a very famous comedian, put his TV show on his website and said, "I'm selling it to you directly." For those of you who may have picked that particular story up, to mixed reaction. Wherever you go, wherever you sell, don't forget you're now having to give someone 30% of whatever you generate if it's through an app, either through the Google Store or through the iTunes Store. So the economics right now don't seem to make sense. It could be a route to market. I think I'm right in saying Channel 4 were very heavily connected to YouTube and then stepped back a bit. I think that's a characteristic with a number of broadcasters who started to ask the question, what's in it for us? what's in it for us commercially? And perhaps what we're doing is we're feeding another business, we're giving another business an opportunity to grow, but not necessarily returning back to us. So.
Referencing Channel 4,
Yeah.
any relevance to you?
Look, we have a very, very strong partnership with YouTube. I think we were one of the first broadcasters to be on there and put long-form content. That isn't the case anymore. I think the platform is, it offers many, many advantages, but for someone who's investing a lot in content, the challenges are, as Tom points out, the price, and obviously the revenue share back to the platform can be challenging at times as well. Compare that with our own platform that we've invested in. We're trying to now evolve that as a destination of choice for broadcasters, for our content providers. We there retain 100% of the revenues, obviously, that we generate on the platform. And also now that platform is underpinned by an incredibly sophisticated data platform that now has about 14 million registered users who are logging on when they come to consume content, which actually means we can serve them better content, better recommendations. And for our advertising partners, we can offer highly targeted propositions where there is a material premium being charged for those. So actually, I think as we look at the transition from broadcast to online, we're seeing that as a result of this data capability that we've developed, we're able actually to really trade these sort of analog pounds and add to them with digital pounds. So we've, at the margins, got ourselves to a position where we're broadly indifferent to whether a consumer watches on our channel as to whether they watch on all four, because of the pricing, because of the way in which we can work with partners to really monetize that. And that is a fantastic position to be in, because it means that we can experiment with windows, with premieres, with different forms of content, and we're not scared of people moving away from the linear channel onto on-demand. And I think, as Tom points out, what a fantastic position to be in versus, say, the print industry, who are not in that position at all.
Yeah. Very confident words from you guys, but I have heard recently that the long tail again, where the smaller niche operators, okay, individually, maybe not a lot of money each one, but if you've got a lot of people in the long tail and you accumulate that, there's a lot of business. If that exists, it's going to take eyeballs away. So some of the niche providers, do they worry you at all?
I mean, they don't worry us, because we can provide a platform for them if they've got a service or a, app or a player they want to put on there. I mean, I think it's an interesting time for the niche providers, because I think the big aggregators like Sky have got really challenging economics at the moment. They've got big competition for the big Hollywood shows and the big deals like Showtime with Netflix and Amazon, so they're having to invest more money in that. They're investing a lot more money in their Premier League, so they're cutting back on channels, on some of the more niche channels or some of the long-tail channels, right. and those content providers have got to look for somewhere to go. Right. Now, whether they can create their own over-the-top apps and sell that content, some of them can. They've got big enough brands to do that and create good little niche brands. Others probably can't.
Or a new form of aggregator, perhaps.
Or a new form of aggregator. So from our perspective, if a fishing channel or a documentary channel or one of the, the Hollywood studios, the Disney Lives, the Hayyus, they come to us, great. We can offer them a platform where they maintain their brand, their metadata gets served with all the other metadata in a seamless way. We can do recommendations. And we can provide all the data back to them. We collect data from over all of our boxes, over 2 million boxes. So, I mean, I think there's opportunities for them, but people have only got a certain amount of money, and you can only pay $2.99 to a certain number of people before you're paying £45 to Sky again.
Keith, it doesn't look like niche keeps you awake at night.
No, I think it's great. I mean, the distribution used to be a high-cost, scarce resource, and now, of course, that's not the case. Yeah. And I think what we've seen is that's given rise to a host of new distribution platforms and a host of new content providers. I think that's great for the UK creative economy and forces broadcasters like ourselves to look at our model and work out how we can innovate to keep pace with that. The only thing I would say in terms of the platform differentiation or choice is that probably it's not the niche content that is driving that choice. I mean, if you look at how the big players are actually now using content to differentiate themselves, it's not through the likes of fishing channels or anything like that. It's through exclusive deals with HBO on the case of Sky, it's through exclusive deals with AMC on the case of BT, and still the traditional battering rams of pay TV that is sports and movies. That's still the case if you're looking to acquire new subscribers or retain your existing subscribers, but it's unquestionably the case that consumers have extra choice now and the niche content providers are providing that.
Justin, are you confident with the area that you've carved out for yourself, or do you see more diversification into other areas?
Well, I think we're very confident and determined to stay focused, as it were, on the niche. And absolutely understand that sort of basic doesn't often drive subscription. I speak as a former cable operator, so kind of know that firsthand. But we're very happy and indeed very keen to continue to engage with all of the growing range of opportunities around distribution. We're on the Sky platform straight after Sky News. We're very happy with that. We'd like to see that continue. I'm sure we will. We're also very happy to have launched on the TV Player app just a few months ago. We get approaches from different types of operators, sort of conditional access services or over-the-top services from all manner of markets around not just the EMEA region in which I'm focused, but from markets further afield. And we're very happy to work with them where it makes a lot of sense, where they can demonstrate to us they're able to deliver the sort of audiences that are interested in the Bloomberg content, but also where we feel that we can add value to their platforms if they're pay or if they're free or if they're ad supported. I guess the sweet spot for us, and I guess for most, shall I say, focused media owners, is where we can also work together to understand our audiences. And that data piece, I think, is probably one of the key items for us and for other niche or focused media owners going forward.
Interesting, let me pick up on that. You guys spending significant amounts of your budget on things other than the content to sort of develop your data and your intelligence systems? Is that a major area of investment for you?
Yeah, it is, but we're a connected platform, so all of our devices are connected.
Yeah.
And Tom's point, I agree. Barb does a very good job, but it does a job with an audience, push button measuring, because that's the way it was set up, and not all homes are connected. All of our boxes are connected. And in the future, with Sky and Virgin and connected TVs, a lot more boxes will be connected. So we can haul back all this data.
Right.
Most of the investment actually is not in the technology in the set-top box. It's in processing the data and understanding the data and applying data science to the data to really get to the bottom of what it means. Because it's not just what are they watching on linear, it is how do people watch on linear versus on demand, what do they record, what do they not record, how do they behave in breaks, and how do they react to program promos, etc.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Keith, what's your take
we've
on
been
that?
investing in this area now for about 6 or 7 years in terms of the data initiative that we've really spearheaded. We've created a team of data scientists who are analysing all of the rich data that we actually get in from the, as I say, 14 million registered users that we've got. In terms of the infrastructure, we've been using sort of open source cloud-based analytics tools to make sure that we can get the best insights from that data. And actually now that's driving real value. If we add up the total amount that we've spent on our data platform and our data capabilities and the staffing of that, and you plot the incremental returns that we believe we're getting from the digital ad sales market, that has now completely paid back, and the data initiative, if you like, is in profit. So it's driving real value for us as a business, and it's transforming our digital sell. It's also having a knock-on impact into the way we engage on traditional media or traditional elements of the media agencies as well, who come in for a conversation around what we can do for them on digital, and then also go on to spend on traditional advertising as well. So it has a real benefit to the business.
Right.
Actually, just to that point, John, I remember when David Abrahams, the chief exec of Channel 4, stood up and said we're a digital business. I don't know how many years ago, but as soon as I heard it, I thought, what is he talking about? I was shocked by that position, and yet he's right. Actually, you fast forward 3 or 4 years, and I think he had to transform Channel 4 from a commissioning business that had a little bit of data to a business that really understood what was going on. And I think what we've heard from the panel is it's all fine having it. It's all fine having a box. It's what do you do with that information? How quickly can you process it? And then how quickly can you insert the right kind of commercial message to make sure you monetize it? And I'm skeptical about how many businesses can really build that themselves. Right. I meet a lot of companies who say we're going to build it, we've got the money to do it. I just don't see it. I'm not persuaded that that's where they should be focusing.
I think it also just requires a different culture set from what broadcasters have traditionally had. I mean, you need to innovate with new technologies, test different analytics tools, deploy things, see how they, test and learn. And I think that's not something broadcasters are traditionally used to doing. They're used to launching carefully crafted, well-researched channel propositions. And I think in the digital landscape, you've got to put things out there, see how consumers react, and iterate over time. And that's, again, a very different cultural mindset.
Uncharted territory in many ways,
And it's not just about the viewing data and the monetization of that and advertising. I mean, for us, we're also sort of instrumenting our UI to collect, very, very rich behavioural data. So to Tom's point, what do people actually do at 9 o'clock? What do they do after that programme? How do they make the choice of the next programme? Which again is useful for us in terms of how we design the product, how we test and A/B test different features and functionalities. But it also has a lot of relevance to our broadcast partners in terms of how are people making decisions about, consuming their content. And I think, very few people know the answer to that. It's all been done by market research to date, and we're going to have rich data on that.
I mean, and just to that point, and again, not to over-egg the sort of the Bloomberg is a focused media business pudding. It's important for our advertisers and sponsors to understand, as well as we can help them understand, but as well as our partners can help them understand the nature of the audiences. But the content that you publish as well does have an impact, and for a business news and finance news global organisations such as ourselves, we have a responsibility to be quite thoughtful about seeing what happens as a result of what we publish. An example I've called out over the last few months it relates to our coverage of Davos. So Davos, for folks who might not be aware, is kind of like a big global capitalist fest. It's kind of like Burning Man, but in the snow over in Switzerland. And as a live news channel, you can imagine, we get very busy, we have a lot of crew, we have a lot of kit, we do a lot of broadcasting from Davos. It's possible to view within the Bloomberg Terminal service, which is several hundred thousand subscribers to multiple screen devices in their offices, which provides lots of data and information about financial markets. It's possible for an audience to be watching the TV channel and for us to see what happens to different parts of the world economy while we're broadcasting. So an example that we use from Davos is that we were interviewing, Jonathan, one of our anchors was interviewing the CEO of Maersk, which is quite a big diversified global shipping business. This guy, over a 2-minute period of the interview, was explaining how their company is going to move forward and develop in certain areas. At the end of that 2 minutes, the share price had gone up by $200 million. As a result of the interview that we were broadcasting live on the terminal, through the app, across all of our platforms. So audience data is helpful in the sense that it can tell you what the viewers are doing, but you can kind of see the real world impact at the same time if you are regarded by the audience as an authoritative source and a niche broadcaster.
I must go see if there are any questions from the audience, because we are running out of time. I assume there is a microphone out there. Yes, there is. Anyone got a question? I've certainly got some more, if there are. There we go. Thank you, David.
Hello, it's David Wood from the European Broadcasting Union. May I just turn a little bit to another aspect of this issue of the IP world, which is to do with hybrid services. Of course, bringing internet to the television set can provide video on demand, and we know that situation. But as you may know, there is another area which is sometimes called hybrid broadcasting, which is essentially adding multimedia to the television programs. It has a long history via teletext and so on. And in recent years, there's been a lot of interest in systems called companion screens, whereby you watch something in multimedia on your tablet while you're watching the TV program at the same time. So it seemed to me personally that the hybrid area, in the UK you have MHEG and HBB-TV, and so on. Germany, they have HBB-TV. It seemed to me this was a really exciting area, particularly companion screens. But I just heard yesterday that they're abandoning HBB-TV in France because viewers have no interest in it. And I spoke to some people from the US networks, and they say American viewers don't give a damn, about this kind of thing. So I wonder what the panel thinks. Was I wrong? Is this not an exciting and important area for broadcasting, hybrid services? Thank you.
Is there anything more than the programme itself?
I mean, we've used online to enhance the traditional shows actually for quite some time. Tom and I were talking beforehand about things like £1 Million Drop, where we had a play-along game several years ago, and we've done that again with things like The Singer Takes It All. YouView is a hybrid platform, as Simon's already said, so again, the opportunity there to use IP to enhance the DTT broadcasts is a fantastic opportunity there. I think when you're looking at companion and second screens, I think this is something that all broadcasters have tried and worked with. I think it's something that has probably gone over a hype curve a few years back and is starting to settle down, where for specific shows there are very, very strong second screen applications. But I think the idea that every single show has to have within it an embedded Twitter feed or a voting application or something like that, I think that's something that we maybe thought was going to happen a few years ago, but just clearly isn't. So I think for the right shows, for the right content formats, it can work. I think it has to be seamlessly bedded into the editorial and has to really work with the creative of the show, rather than it just being, you've got a show, for example, I don't know, let's choose a Channel 4 one, Come Dine With Me, and then there's a poll on the right-hand side saying who do you want to win, which doesn't change the editorial whatsoever. I think it has to be more sophisticated than that if it's really going to work.
I mean, I suppose in a way we've always had a companion screen. It's called the Bloomberg Terminal. And so you'll see the purpose of our broadcast portfolio, our media portfolio more generally, is in many ways really a device to encourage people to take up that companion screen, not least because the Bloomberg Terminal is a significant source of revenue for us. So if you tune into Bloomberg Surveillance this morning at 11:30, it's live on the Bloomberg TV app, you'll see the interview with Mervyn King. I guarantee that when Francine's interviewing him, she'll be referencing the price of sterling, and she'll encourage audiences to use the Bloomberg Terminal to track the price of sterling over the last 24 hours. So we've always been in the world of companion screens in that respect. Whether we're going to build out something more specific to, as it were, the more broadly distributed devices, there's not so much of a driver for us because we've already got the terminal business, and we're very pleased with that.
Tom?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I expected to see that world really build. And I think what I've seen is that you just can't control the viewer. I think social media has driven interactions. I think it's happening on a second screen, but it's happening through social media, predominantly happening through Facebook and Twitter. And I think the viewer is saying, I don't want you to prescribe to me the environment by which I'm having another conversation with you. I think they want to have a conversation with their friends. And therefore, I think two things are probably happening. One is there's no financial return, and it's expensive. And when it doesn't work, by the way, it's awful. So if you have a voting experience and you don't, and I've seen this, by the way, with £1 Million Drop in some markets, if you cannot synchronize it precisely, you can really damage the viewing experience. So one, I don't think there was a return. And secondly, I think just social media has found a way of satisfying viewers and ensuring that they are talking to their friends. And that I think carries much more weight. So I'm not sure that concept of red button and interaction is going to come back for a long time.
I'm going to ask one closing question. I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to go off-piste. We haven't discussed this before, but I just realised we've got in the audience there quite a few technologists very into the technology and into image quality, and we haven't touched upon whether or not UHD in all its variants are important to your plans going forward. I've just come through binging on Marco Polo in HDR and UHD, looking for some more content, but it's not a selfish question, it's a serious one. Does high quality figure in your plans?
I think it does. I think you need a pretty big TV screen to get the benefit of it. We already support, we do IP broadcast UHD for BT Sports, and we support UHD for 4K for Netflix. So we're there. We've got a set-top box that supports it. It's reasonably well watched. Given the penetration of devices out there, and I think. The challenge for us is always, picture quality for IP delivered content needs to be, as good and better than broadcast content. And you know, I think we've achieved that already with UHD, but I think picture quality and the quality standard we set ourselves is so that the customers, you know, see it as a seamless experience and don't really care where the content's coming from.
Yes, it is very important. I mean, I think we were one of the first broadcasters to have a HD simulcast of our channels, and so we constantly look at how we can improve the experience for viewers. So UHD in that regard is obviously very important. I would say the challenge, though, is just that as a mass market free-to-air broadcaster, the fact that UHD broadcast can't readily be distributed on, for example, the DTT network at this stage, I think is a significant limitation, and
whole
therefore
new subject in itself,
hinders the extent to which we will significantly invest in that.
Any relevance for you?
Well, in the sense that picture quality is pretty much a basic requirement to deliver any reasonable broadcast quality service, then that's just a given. The challenges that we find are in part to do with, I think, the point there about some of the platforms are not quite yet where perhaps we would want them to be, but that's kind of less an issue for us to have to drive strongly. But as a globally distributed channel, there is that sort of general direction, I think, in which quality is increasingly recognised. But obviously for the data set that we provide, I guess it's not quite up there with Marco Polo.
Tom, and last comment on quality?
I'm not so sure. I'm more neutral to. I don't think it's going to be the driver. Look, I think the industry pushed 3D and it didn't work. And even though the experience to the consumer hasn't yet worked. I mean, whether it will, but I think there's a movement away from it. It's not just about the screen; it's about the size of the pipe. I think you have to think about the whole journey when you're looking at digital. And I suspect, given that so many of us are now used to watching movies on very small devices, I'm less persuaded that big experience is going to be the driver for new technology and for people wanting to pay more.
Thanks for that, Tom. And as I said in my presentation, I think what it's done, it's consolidated the fact we're in a multi-format world, because SD hasn't gone away, HD is still there. We've got variants of UHD, so we've got to live with a multi-format world and choose the right format for the programming. Our time is more than up, so first of all, I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you very much.